who's got 8 kids in her house right now. Why the heck would I run for vice president? Huh? I got other things to do, obviously. Sometimes private citizens must become public citizens. Sometimes you got to get out of your arena of comfort, whether that's your couch or your community, and engage in issues that are broader issues. We need to. Extraordinary times require extraordinary actions.
That's Winona LaDuke, and this is Alternative Radio. I'm Tanya Lohendorf. This edition of AR features Winona LaDuke on Native America, All Our Relations. The United States is the wealthiest and most powerful nation on the planet. It has been responsible for great acts of compassion and for supporting despots for their perceived temporary value. It has left a trail of broken treaties at home and abroad. The wealth gap increases as workers are exploited and left unemployed, with looted retirement funds and without access to health care. The U.S. spends billions annually for military aid around the world while its aging schools and inner cities crumble. Its vast natural resources, as well as those of the rest of the world, are indiscriminately used, leaving the earth heavily polluted. The time is right for more great acts of compassion. If the riches of this country were instead focused on improving life on the planet, what greatness could be attained? It may sound impossible, but movements begin with one person, and Winona LaDuke is a living example. An Ojibwe activist from Minnesota and mother to 8 children, she works in her community to reclaim its resources and improve conditions for her people. She took her beliefs nationally, running in the past 2 presidential elections on the Green Party ticket with Ralph Nader. LaDuke lectures on the importance of creating truly sustainable societies. She has authored several books. Her latest is All Our Relations, Native Struggles for Land and Life. Winona LaDuke spoke at the University of New Mexico at Albuquerque.
There's a phrase in Ojibwe I was going to talk about, which is Jimisawabandaming, which means positive window shopping for your future. See, I like that. The Ojibwe is just like other people. We have really remarkable ways of saying things, but that's what that means, positive window shopping for your future, which is a process I think we need to be about as families, as individuals, and as communities. We need to be about the process of envisioning what we want our future to look like and going through the work of putting our hearts, our prayers, and our work, our action, our hands towards making that future. Because that is the privilege of being human, is that you have that right and that responsibility to control your destiny. But that is also something that is a sacred thing for the future. One of the things I was most afraid of in the year 2000 is that I would wake up in the year 2000 and see the year 2000 brought to you by Nike and Walmart. Which it was not actually blazing across the sky, but to be honest, I know that which you all know, which is that corporations, except for apparently Enron, have 50 or 100-year plans. And, within that, they have certain ideas on how things are going to be, and they have those ideas that impact our communities. And we quite often in our communities do not have these 50 or 100-year plans. Many of our communities we struggle day to day to get by. Many of our communities we are so, it is not even post-traumatic stress, it is ongoing traumatic stress, is what they call what occurs in our communities. And so we do not quite often envision what that future is. And that is, I think, it is incumbent upon us to take that responsibility and to work on that process of articulating that, because one thing that I know, which I think that you all know as well, is that our own communities, whatever those communities are, as well as America in the broader context, our folks are not only just creatures of habit, but we are afraid of change sometimes. We think, well, I don't know if we could do that because this is what we have now and we are used to that. And what we all know is that change is inevitable. This has been a very rapidly transforming society, but the question is always who determines the change. That is the question. And so what it behooves us to do, I believe, is to be those who determine what the change is and to figure out that process of making that reality. Having said that and talked about that, I'm going to talk about two basic things. I'm going to talk about first what motivates me a little bit as an individual. Then I'm going to talk about more broadly some political issues. I will tell you honestly that I'm motivated by two things as Anishinaabe Kwe. I'm motivated first by our teachings as Indigenous people and the teachings of my own community. And second, I'm motivated by the fact that I'm a mother. Each community has its own sets of teachings, and we're fortunate that the Creator gave us instructions. Someplace back in everyone's genetic memory, there are those instructions on how to live and with all that is around us. But those teachings come from certain places. They come from a set of laws that the Creator gave us. There is natural law. That is the highest law, higher than the laws made by nation states or municipalities. One would do well to live in accordance with that. And they talked about the time ahead. They talked about a time when many of our people would disappear. And they had no name for what depopulated this continent, the plagues and the epidemics. 90% depopulation. They had no name for that, but that's what they said, our people would disappear. But I think about that because in this country, for instance, I went to school in the East Coast, and there's this guy, you ever heard of Amherst, Massachusetts? Amherst Square, Amherst College, named after this guy named Lord Jeffrey Amherst. And Lord Jeffrey Amherst, is a very important guy to a lot of white people apparently, but the guy was the single largest purveyor of smallpox-ridden blankets. He was responsible for wiping out millions of Indigenous people with those smallpox-ridden blankets, and yet they named towns, squares, colleges after him, and all across this country. They've still got like a Chivington Street up there in Colorado. It's a perfect example. Responsible for the Sand Creek Massacre, Harney Peak. This country is named after mass murderers. No, we wouldn't go around right now and name cities after Eichmann or Hitler. A lot of names in this country are exactly that. What am I talking about in this? Kit Carson, all of those guys in the Southwest. And so I bring that up because that is one thing that, as we talk about united we stand in this country, we still got a lot of work to do, to fix some of those things. And that is one of the things is those names, because it is a slap in the face to not just to Indigenous people, but to justice. I'm going to tell you the second thing that I'm motivated by most basically is that I'm a mom. I got 3 of my own. I got 2 strays that I raised. I got 3 stepkids. I got 8 kids in my house right now. So if I'm not doing laundry, I'm just thinking about what else I got to do. With any other mom who knows, it's an immense privilege, and it is the hardest job in the whole darn world, being a good mom. And you try the best you can, and but I'll tell you what, I find it absolutely maddening. You teach your kids things, and then you look out there and the society has this totally absurd set of laws that have no relationship to the values you just taught your kids. So I'll tell you how it starts. Basic things like eating. I always, if I watch enough TV, I'd get the idea of what I'm supposed to do for my kids and how to be a good mom. Supposed to read your box tops, make sure everything's good, and make sure your whites are their whitest and their brights are their brightest. That's it, And they say that average American kid watches like 14,000 commercials a year. I mean, if you watch your recommended daily allowance of television, oh my gosh, that's horrendous. So anyway, you get this stuff just totally imparted to you, and you cannot succeed. I live on a dirt road. How do you get the whites the whitest? That's like impossible. I just had to write that one off. Breakfast cereal. That's what I was going to talk about. You ever notice there's like a billion choices in the breakfast cereal? Uh-huh. So you cannot take 8 kids shopping for breakfast cereal. You just can't. You can't actually take 8 kids in the store at the same time. It just costs too much money. It's a total headache. So I had to make a rule on the breakfast cereal. And the rule I made was that you were only allowed to eat brown breakfast cereal. That's how I started. And that seemed to work pretty good, because what I realized is that I don't actually think that Fruit Loops and Lucky Charms were on the Creator's list at all. Not intended, And if you could stick to the brown, then you could look on the box top and try to get the correct nutrition and not too much sugar. But then I realized so I spent all this time trying to do the right thing, but on the other hand, why should I be more concerned about how much sugar is in my son's breakfast cereal and not concerned about how much PCBs and methyl mercury and arsenic? So I found out that I had to get engaged in a higher level of political activism than I would necessarily be comfortable with. One of the things that really bothered me was these fish consumption advisories in Minnesota, and we still got them up there. But I went to these hearings And they're trying to increase the allowable level of mercury coming out of coal-fired power plants and incinerators. And, my community is a lot of fishing people, subsistence fishing communities. And, we got 47 lakes on my reservation, for instance. So everybody fishes a lot. And right now, you got a fish consumption advisory out that says you can only eat like one walleye a week for most of those lakes, and one northern a week. When I said, I said go to this hearing, and I said I'm not a scientist, but I'm not a moron. I know what bioaccumulation is, and I know what biomagnification is, and I know if I can only eat one fish a week right now, and you keep increasing those allowable levels, my grandchildren are not going to be able to fish. So we oppose that. And so far, we actually have done pretty good in the state of Minnesota. I finally read the mercury reduction report, and we are moving ahead in diminishing the mercury levels that are going into our lakes from incinerators and coal-fired power plants. But, geez, then the Bush and Cheney administration come in. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. So you got to, engage in these levels of activism that you wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with. I'm also motivated by teachings that I have in my house or that I was raised with. We all raised with the teaching, don't steal. Did you all hear that? Don't steal when you're a kid? Don't steal. That's a pretty simple teaching, But then I look out there, and my reservation is not unlike Indian country. My reservation, however, 90% of the land within my reservation borders is held by non-Indian interests. Largest landholders, federal, state, and county governments who took the land illegally, annexed it. Look across Indian country. And that is the story. Pretty much every national park carved out of Indian country. We have the Tamarack National Wildlife Refuge over there at Leech Lake. They got Chippewa National Forest. But Black Hills of South Dakota. You go over there to Salish and Kootenai, and you got the National Bison Range carved entirely out of their reservation. Wainema National Forest over there in Oregon. Tell your kids not to steal, but you got to tell your government not to steal. If you took the land illegally, you should return it. And that's one of the things I'll talk about later, but that's what I believe, is that public land holdings within Indian reservations should be returned to Indian people. And I also believe, actually, that there's a lot of land that was within the reservation that you have to return to. And I think that is a big issue, because historically the environmental movement has not been in favor of that. And there's a lot of reasons why, originally a lot of these parks were carved out of reservations as they separated Indians from wilderness and made wilderness a place you went and recreated, and Indians were sent to reservations. And that's what happened at the turn of the last century. And, that's a long philosophical discussion that we need to have, but it has to do with justice. And one thing I will tell you is that the only compensation for land is land. Tell my kids not to steal, tell the government not to steal. Tell my kids not to be greedy. That is really hard in this country. This is a country which totally aggrandizes greed. We don't ask how they got rich. We don't ask if they paid decent wages. We don't ask if they got rich by taking somebody else's 401k, or by, taking somebody else's land, or taking someone else's trees for a quarter on the dollar, or taking someone's water rights. We don't ask. We just assume they must have earned it. I don't know if that's a Protestant work ethic or some kind of teaching like that, but it is not. That's what I tell my kids. Don't be greedy. And we look out there and we see an immense amount of greed. And the impact of that greed on us on a worldwide scale and on North America is devastating. This UN report, there's this book I usually bring with me. It's called Economic Apartheid in America. I always want to tell people about that book, but it has an amazing book of these stories. So figure this. We have this immense disparity of wealth, and the rich are getting richer on a worldwide scale and the poor are getting poorer. 225 individuals in the world in 1998, according to the United Nations Development Program, had the same wealth as the bottom 2.5 billion people in the world. Now, where were they on that little lesson on greed? Is what I want to know. Did they skip it or what? Because that is obscene. That level of wealth at the top and the disparity at the bottom, and what it costs in terms of human misery and loss of dignity. So what the UN figured out is that those guys, if they just did a 4% levy on their wealth, which is not even the equivalent of a Rolls Royce for each of them, you could provide basic food, you could provide basic prenatal health care, basic education for all those folks at the bottom. Just a little bit from the top would really affect the bottom. Those are the issues that we talk about today in terms of the Jubilee movement, or the issues about debt. The issues about the North extracting extravagant payments at exorbitant, how do you do exorbitant in sign language? Just be big. Exorbitant interest rates. Anyway, out of these countries, that cannot even feed their people. It is so obscene. But it is not just the disparity of wealth between individuals. It is also the disparity of wealth, the growing disparity of wealth between corporations and individuals. Of the 100 largest economies in the world, 51 are corporations. Walmart just crawled up to the top, even surpassing Exxon. What I wonder is how come they cannot pay a living wage? The richest corporation in the world and associates cannot make even enough to support their family. That is something totally wrong with that. My teenage daughters always say, "Mom, how come you don't like Walmart?" What I don't like is that the Republic of Walmart has an economy that's larger than the economy of 100 countries in the world. Little countries like the GDP of Ireland, the GDP of Israel, or the GDP of Portugal are less than the GDP of Walmart. It just totally astonishes me. And what goes with that is the laws of this society which have created the situation where corporations are natural persons under the law. So the Republic of Walmart has the same rights, civil rights, human rights as you and I. And yet they are larger than 100 countries. So there's something kind of askew, let us say, in my perception of how the laws have come to be in this country and internationally. But that disparity, it is devastating our communities. That is the reality. We are becoming increasingly polarized. More of our people are going to prison, and more of our people are moving into gated communities. You and I are not in the gated communities end, most likely. But that is what is happening. Increasingly, one of the largest growth sectors in the real estate industry is in gated communities. If you can afford to do that, that's where you go. Putting our kids in private schools, and then sending the rest wherever they go when you do not have enough to pay for the schools. The impacts of that on our community are going to be long-term. The more disparity there is. And it comes down to these issues of greed. It absolutely comes down to issues of greed. The same book I was reading, they have this little chart in there. And in 1980, an average American CEO made about 40 times more than the average American factory worker. You know how much they make now? 419 times more than the average American worker. And you compare that to other really radical countries like Germany, 22 to 1. Japan, 16 to 1. U.S., 419 to 1. Someone should ask those guys about that greed. And that is something that I believe absolutely as progressive people, as people of conscience in this country, we must challenge. We must challenge the aggrandizing of greed. I tell my kids, you must clean up your old mess before you make a new mess. You guys got that rule in your house? You feel like a banshee about the 40th time you repeat it in your house. So anyway, I tell my kids that, and we don't got that rule at all in this society, do we? I mean, look at that. Look at these corporations out there. What is the rule that they have? And it's pretty much, you just keep right on making that mess, and then somebody will clean it up one day. Perfect example, the nuclear industry. And what have they got? 50 years of the nuclear industry in this country. They had all those smart guys they brought in from Nazi Germany, right? Then they got, all these special perks. Like 65% of the research and development money in the Department of Energy for 40 years went to nuclear energy. Pretty good perk there, huh? So they got little special subsidies here and there. Everybody paying their electric bill, doing really good. And what did they come up with after 50 years of the nuclear industry? Well, first of all, you got 1,000 abandoned uranium mines on the Navajo Reservation. Nobody cleaned up. You still got RICA. They can't even compensate those people. And the last thing I heard, now someone excuse me, maybe they have gone back on it, but last thing I heard, if those uranium miners and all the other people who were irradiated really got sick from radiation, cannot even compensate people under RICA. That would be kind of the not cleaning up your mess or not taking care of the mess you made in the first place. And then you got what you got now, 50 years of the nuclear industry in this country. What did they come up with, their nuclear waste proposal? The proposal is take it from 109 nuclear reactors in this country, put it on America's interstates, America's railways, 90,000 shipments of nuclear waste that would be, drive it on major interstates and railways, take it out and dump it on an Indian reservation. That is the nuclear waste policy in this country, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. Either Yucca Mountain, up there in western Shoshone Territory in Nevada, or the other proposal, Skull Valley Goshute, over there just a little ways from the Olympics. I mean, totally absurd. That is in its essence not, you must clean up your mess before you make a new mess. That is pretty much don't go dump your mess on someone else. And that is, not only is that rude, but that is not just a native issue, that is a public health hazard. There's a reason that they call this bill Mobile Chernobyl. The equivalent of each cask, the equivalent of 250 Hiroshima bombs on the highway moving. What's going to happen when one of those guys falls off? Going to go out there in the little white suits, and little sweeping, going to clean that up? This is a big security threat. What you think? Who wants to guard 90,000 shipments? What's the solution? Don't make it. Decommissioning. Decommissioning is a long word for George W. I know. Decommissioning. 5 syllables. Christ. That is the word of the future, though, George. You gotta decommission. This guy can't believe I was so mean to George, huh? Just wait. No. He's like decommissioning. Nuclear power plants are a heck of a way to boil water. A lot of better options, Solar energy would work good. Plenty of options, but that is the reality. You got to turn off the faucet before you're going to quit the flood of nuclear waste in this country. Finally, I tell my kids you're responsible for your actions, and there you go. That's that problem of the creation, totally maddening to me, the creation of the limited liability corporation. I myself would like to be a limited liability corporation, but I'm not. I'm actually responsible for my actions. But these guys, like private fuel storage, the guys, 11 utilities hooked up to dump nuclear waste out there at Skull Valley Goshute, a limited liability corporation. How fortunate for them. They get all the benefit, get all that money, and only limited liability. It's that kind of insanity. You try to parent, do the right thing with your kids, teach them all these good values, and then they go out there and the society and public policy in the society are totally insane and totally contrary to everything you just taught your kids. So that is the kind of thing that motivates someone like me to political activism. My grandpa used to watch TV. I remember sitting with him, and he'd be looking at the TV. He was about 75, 80 years old. He'd be playing, and they'd be, scoundrels and thieves. Scoundrels and thieves. He was right. Of course, I'm sure you have some excellent people in your New Mexico legislature, but in the meantime, I know we got a lot of scoundrels and thieves in Minnesota, so... But good people need to run for office. We need to over time. So I talk at these colleges, and I pray that some of you young folks will one day do the right thing. I'll tell you a little bit about what we do at White Earth, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more nationally. We work on opposing clear cutting and illustrate our trees are worth more standing than cut. We make maple syrup, and because you can make maple syrup in once a year and taste spring in your forest, or you can cut your trees and come back in another 40 years and cut them. It's just a different way of relating to your forest. I spent a lot of time working on water quality issues up there. But one of the issues we're working on, for instance, we put up our first wind generator. That was a big thing in our community. I think that that's the future. We're on the edge of the Great Plains. That's called the Saudi Arabia wind power. And we're hoping to put those up for household size wind generators. And then maybe one day we'll put up a big bunch of wind turbines. Finally, I work on culture. Last thing I would talk about in terms of our work is that I'm really mad about this. I talked to you earlier about our story about wild rice, monoman. The Creator gave us that. So all these years, us Anishinaabe people have had that rice, and we ate it ourselves, and we use it to feed our souls and feed our bellies. And we also traded it. We generated pretty good income off of that, the sales of that rice. And what happened is in the 1970s, the University of Minnesota, as these universities do, started monkeying around with the rice crop, and they figured out how to hybrid it. And then they put it in some rice paddies in Minnesota and called it their state grain, and they were feeling really smart. And about 3 years later, the state of California got wind of that, and today 3/4 of all rice that is on the shelf comes from California. And it is grown in diked paddies, a lot of times with fertilizers, chemicals, fungicides, harvested with a combine. Us, we go on a little canoe, a couple Indians in the canoe. I usually knock. Get that rice in your canoe, bring it in, drag your canoe up off your lake. It's just beautiful out there on your lake. go drag your canoe up, and then you go in and you bring it in and you leave it out to dry, and then you take it and you parch it in these big drums, turn like this, and then you run it through a little fanning mill. A long time ago we used to dance on that rice. That's how you get the chaff off. And then you have a fan, or else you winnow it by hand. And then that's how you make that rice. That's what you do. That's what the Creator intended. Didn't intend for airboats. We have it on pretty good word that the Creator did not give Uncle Ben's wild rice. But they took it, you know. And so those guys got it. They grow it in California, and price of rice at Lakeside dropped for our people. Totally devastated our economies. You know, you probably could guess the statistics on my reservation, just like every other reservation. 50-60% unemployment. A lot of people below the poverty level, and a lot of other social issues associated with that. And that was a good source of income for our people. And so then the price bottomed out, and those white buyers would come to our lakes and cheat us about our rice. So we started organizing, and now we process our rice and market it ourselves on our reservation. And Leech Lake even has more, and our tribes are recovering that rice economy and marketing it. But now we're fighting, because first of all we fight these labeling. These guys all get to say they got wild rice. We say that's tame rice, you know, if it's grown in a paddy. But now I am really mad, because I discovered this year. See, I'm really mad. I just love watching it. They're so cool, these guys. I'm really mad because University of Minnesota last year mapped the genome of the wild rice. That's not a good thing when you're an Indigenous person and they start mapping genomes. And why do you think they mapped the genome? You think they're particularly interested in protecting rice for Native people? I don't think so. They're interested in protecting, first of all, the paddy rice industry, but probably more than that. They're interested in taking things from the rice genome and sticking it in other things. Because that's what they do. They got some trout gene in a tomato now, and they got all sorts of funky stuff out there, you know. These other countries have organized far more successfully than we have in the United States against these GMOs. This is a scary thing. What we're concerned about is that they monkey with our rice. And it took 5 years for them to contaminate the heart of the corn in Chiapas with GMO. That pollen moves, and then they just totally transform the genetics of something that is thousands of years old by some darn scientist someplace in a lab with absolutely nothing to stop it. No laws, no nothing. So they mapped the thing. They haven't monkeyed with it so far. We've been grilling them pretty good, but we're going to try to stop them from monkeying with it anymore there. And then I found out, I got really mad. I found out that these guys patented wild rice. Now, doesn't that seem wrong? Yeah. Patent wild rice. Those things don't sound like they should go together, patent and wild rice. So now, we had this big meeting 2 weeks ago, and all those Indians were really mad. We had this meeting up at Fond du Lac Reservation. There's about 70, 80 guys up there, and all from all these different tribes, and they are really upset about this patent issue. So we're looking at trying to challenge that patent. There were some successful patent challenges. The Indians in India challenged successfully the patent of W.R. Grace on the neem tree. They challenged that, and then there was another patent. Somebody patented quinoa. And those Indians down in South America said, I don't think so. And they won that patent case.
That's Winona LaDuke on Native America, All Our Relations. You're listening to Alternative Radio. You can get a copy of this program by calling toll-free 1-800-444-1977. Again, that toll-free number is 1-800-444-1977. Stay tuned at the end for complete details on ordering.
And then there's a challenge that is still going on. I don't think that they have won it, and I don't know how it's going to go with the basmati rice. But these are big issues of globalization, is what they are. They are the issues of who has the right to control life. These are the issues of who has the right to control the crops in our communities and how they got those rights. And so on my little puny reservation in northern Minnesota, the issues that we face are really these issues of globalization. And I tell you that because these are the communities that are fighting them. And we may seem like we're really far away, but those struggles have international implications, all those struggles. And so that's what we work on in our area. So why would someone like me who's got 8 kids in her house right now and really busy at home and all that laundry, why the heck would I run for vice president, huh? I got other things to do, obviously. I'll tell you a couple reasons. I just got Ralph's book. Any of you seen Ralph's new book? Yeah. It's called, what's it called? Crashing the Party? Very clever. That guy's smart. Very good. I'll tell you a couple things. First is, first time I ever said this, Ralph was standing next to me and I saw him blush. I never saw Ralph blush before in his whole life. But anyway, when I was a little kid, I had 3 heroes, and one was Batman, and one was Spider-Man, and one was Ralph Nader. Because to me, he was the people's superhero. He used to fight all these bad guys, and I remember being like 8 or 9 and watching the guy on TV and going, he's right. Of course, I come from a family that was like that. He's right. I sit there and say that, thank God for good parenting. And I did try to talk to Ralph about the outfit. I was thinking a little cape. Don't you think a little cape with the R on the back? Hey, I come from the state where Jesse Ventura is the governor. Feather boa and all, the guy. And so I'm thinking, in the future we might go for that. But Ralph did not listen on that thing. The other thing I wanted Ralph to do, and maybe you guys can help me on this, is I got those kids. You guys ever see that movie Toy Story? And that little guy Woody, the little sheriff guy. And then did you ever see the Woody doll? That came out, this little cloth doll with a little plastic cowboy hat. And he had this crank in the back. I wanted to make a Ralph Nader doll like that. So you think a little gray suit, and you could pull the back, and it'd say, "End corporate crime." End corporate crime. That'd be good, huh? I got those kids. I was thinking how to popularize things, So far, Ralph has not said go on that one. But anyway, maybe you guys could work on it with me. I think it's an important thought. So the other thing is that Ralph is right. Sometimes private citizens must become public citizens. Sometimes you got to get out of your arena of comfort, whether that's your couch, which it is for many Americans, or your house, or your yard, or your community, and engage in issues that are broader issues. We need to. Extraordinary times require extraordinary actions. Our mother, the earth, requires our actions and our voices. As unpopular as it may be, dissent is very American, and I'm not unpatriotic. I just want you to know I've seen a lot of flags in the past 6 months. And I would like to see as much patriotism to a land as I've seen to a flag. That would be remarkable. I will tell you that honestly, that is what I am. I'm far less patriotic to a flag than I am to a land. And it is those kinds of things which really require our actions, and require our voices, and require us to speak out. So I'm going to talk about a couple of issues now, kind of more national and some with some implications here. The first is these issues of militarism and terrorism. I already had a lot of problems with our military expenditures. I'm from a community that is not unlike the communities a lot of you are from. That stuff does not actually ever trickle down to. I got kids that go to school in trailers. I got social service programs that do not exist. No capitalization of our economy. We have a lot of disarray. And I know the difference between what is expended on the military and what is expended on social services in this country. That is getting worse right now. And it is not changing or benefiting our communities. So I have this little thing here. I always like this. Women Against Military Madness, what a radical bunch they are. They're all about 75 in Minneapolis, but anyway, they gave me this. I like this thing here. So look at this, $17 billion, which we could spend on 10,000 nuclear weapons, or we could hire 425,000 new teachers. Yeah. Check that out, that thing there. $11 billion, 2.5 Seawolf submarines. Those are expensive guys, huh? $11 billion, 2.5 Seawolf submarines, or provide health insurance for 11 million kids. Yeah. Wow. Or $7 billion. You could put 25,000 troops someplace, which seems like they are moving everywhere now, huh? Every time I open up the newspaper, where I heard one of those guys talking about North Korea. The Philippines, North Korea, every once in a while they bring up Cuba, and we could be sending some troops down there, just any place that they don't like them. That is the inference. I'm totally opposed to that level of intervention. So $7 billion, you could do what they're doing with it, which is 25,000 troops, or you could get Head Start to 1.7 million eligible but unserved kids. Even right after 9/11. You see what happened with those airlines? I'm not a fan of corporate welfare. I do fly a lot. I didn't want to see those airlines go under. What did they get? They got, what, $15 billion, right? Yeah. Took them like 2 weeks to get that chunk of change. That's pretty good, you know? Pretty quick. I myself wish we could get other appropriations that quick. Welfare reform budget coming up this year. Entire budget, I was talking to someone, the federal matching portion was $16 billion. So those guys got $15 billion for the airlines, and that's the entire federal welfare matching budget, $16 billion is what they're talking about. For all these people who cannot even have decent food, nothing. Maybe those airline executives will go lobby for that, huh? Get things a little faster or something, you know. But I think of those disparities. You know, when I ran for vice president in 2001, do you guys have Savers here? Yes, you do, right? The excellent used clothing store? Anyway, so, you know, you got all those kids in your house, you're shopping Savers, you know. I prefer used jeans myself. Anyway, who wants to spend $75 on a pair of jeans? That is absurd. So Savers, $1 a pair of jeans. They were having a little blue light special in there. So I was in there. I had my shopping cart full of jeans. This lady stops me and she says, "Aren't you running for vice president?" And I said, yeah, I sure am, and that's exactly how I manage the federal budget. You know? Talk about, you know, it's absurd. Reuse, recycle. I mean, those are the things we need to be doing. And then I was looking at those big contracts that just came out, Lockheed, all these big military contractors. Aren't those guys that were charging us like $10,000 a bolt a couple years ago? And they did that big GAO investigation. Like, I know that a bolt does not cost $10,000. You know, that's one of the problems is these guys have no idea how to manage money. Those guys in Washington, they spend this money like that. They have no idea how to manage a budget because they never had to, half of them. So militarism has already had a big impact on our communities, and we need to address that. And we need to speak against vast expenditures on the military when Homeland Security is built in taking care of your children. Homeland Security is built in ensuring that our families and our cities are safe, not by more police, but by ensuring that there is quality of life, that people get a decent wage, that people have health care, that you have treatment programs and you aren't just sending everybody to jail who has a drug-related offense. But, you know, I'll tell you more broadly, I'm totally opposed to terrorism. 100% opposed to terrorism. But you know what I think? Then we shouldn't fund them. Don't give terrorists money. That's it, you know. The United States is a large supporter of terrorism. On a worldwide scale, who's the largest purveyor of small guns in the world? That'd be us. The largest purveyor of weapons. Most wars being fought in the world today are fought not with F-16s, but they're fought with M16s, if that's what you want to call a small weapon. That'll be us. We'd be selling them and we'd be giving them to everybody around the world. And in this period of, there's all this revisionism that's going on about wars. Remember that World War I, that was one of the last grand wars. In World War I, 90% of the people killed were combatants. Now, 90% of the people killed in conflicts are non-combatants. That would be Colombia. That would be an example of that. And Colombia is now the second largest recipient of U.S. military aid, having eclipsed Egypt. And we're expanding to the Andean Regional Initiative. That is militarizing a lot of villages. That is causing a lot of people to die. I was in Chiapas a number of years ago, and I know a number of you were down there as well. But I just remember seeing armored personnel carriers and tanks sitting there with women that had bandanas or ski masks on, because they did not want people to know who they were. Because if the military saw them, they would be raped or they would be killed. And these women were my age. This one woman was breastfeeding her child, you know. And so I asked her, I says, how come you took up arms against the government? You know, I said it in English, gets translated to Spanish, then gets translated to Tzotzil, and back. She says, because we are tired of living like animals. She said, we have no food, we have no health care, we have no schools, we have nothing, and they come and take that which we have. They treat us like animals. That is what she said. You know, I looked out there, I see those tanks, and you know what? That year, $52 million of military aid sent to Mexico. $52 million. Who was Mexico's enemy? You know, is that Guatemala, 9 million people going to invade Mexico? I don't think so. Texas, they already tried that. You know, they could do that. That's absurd. $52 million in military aid. Then you look at these other countries. So, this radical woman, these were the days when you could, this was Madeleine Albright talking. She was radical, huh? She says, in Angola over the past 4 years, 1998, enough money has been spent on bullets to kill every man, woman, and child 10 times, but somehow no one can find the resources to provide food for the young or medicine for the ill. Great Lakes region of Africa, fighting fueled by 90 million in small arms, has not only diverted resources from developmental needs, it created new demands for economic reconstruction and basic human subsistence that have now cost more than $2 billion. Colombia. I lost one of my best friends 3 years ago in Colombia. Her name was Ingrid Washinawatuck Elisa. She was a Menominee woman from northern Wisconsin, a human rights worker. She worked in New York at a foundation, and she went down with 2 other people, a Native Hawaiian woman and another guy, human rights workers. They went down to work with the UA, who at that time were fighting Occidental Petroleum and Al Gore. You know, she went down there to work with them on language projects. She was kidnapped by the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, the FARC, held for 5 days, and assassinated. And the thing that I could never forgive the American government for is that I paid for the damn bullet, and I paid for the gun. And the fact is that her death devastated our community and devastated our family. But her death put a name and a face to the 30,000 people that are killed in Colombia in the past 5 years, or the million that have been relocated or dislocated because of the war that we fund down there. It is that totally baffles me. As we talk about terrorism in this country, but we still have the School of the Americas. We're 60,000 terrorists. We taught how to torture people in their villages and run death squads in El Salvador and Guatemala, and all those Colombians we trained at the School of the Americas. If you do not support terrorism, do not fund it. But that is what I absolutely believe, is that we have to be consistent if that's what we want to talk about. Don't be buddies with these countries. You know, we was buddies with Osama until pretty recently, as I recall. It's those kinds of things. I'm a little smarter than that. I don't know how to pick friends, you know. We are a very rich and powerful country. And the decisions that are made in this country deeply impact people throughout the world. It is absolutely incumbent upon us to raise our voice. You know, we got a couple guys from Minnesota that aren't so bad as senators. We got Wellstone and Dayton. You know, you guys got more scoundrels than us, I guess. But, you know, it's those kinds of things to kind of deconstruct the patriotic paranoia. I dissent from the government, but it is not unpatriotic to dissent. The foundation of America is based on dialogue and dissent and your First Amendment rights. You know, those are things that in the upcoming months we must absolutely cherish. We must absolutely struggle to retain. You and I know, I mean, I'm looking in the room, there are a lot of people of color in this room, and we are the people who are going to be first hit. Anti-terrorism, every immigrant population, the police, they come to our communities first. It is those things, you know, and then they come to other people's communities if you've got a different opinion. So it is those things that we must absolutely redouble our voices on. Second thing, just briefly, is something that you know far more about than I do, which is bad energy policy. This is the state of New Mexico. You know, this has got to be, this in Montana have to probably be the showcases of bad energy policy, pretty much, from what I could ascertain. I don't know about that guy, Dick Cheney. Y'all watched that movie, The Spy Who Shagged Me? Did you guys see that movie? I know it's embarrassing some of you to say that you saw it, but I see all those movies. But anyway, there's this guy in The Spy Who Shagged Me named Dr. Evil. And, frozen cryogenically for 30 years, comes back totally out of touch. So that's what Dick Cheney reminds me of. Dr. Evil. You know, frozen cryogenically for 30 years, the guy comes back, and he's got this energy policy which looks like it came out of the Nixon administration. I mean, nobody said nuclear power since Nixon. You know, the guy slept through Chernobyl, totally missed 3 Mile Island, you know, missed the fact that we don't have a nuclear waste plan. I mean, you know, so he comes up with this absurd set of proposals. You know, it'll be really interesting to see who was on his dance card. You think we'll ever find that out? You know, it's true. They released like the list of who was at the White House for an evening soiree the same night. But who wrote the national energy policy cannot get. that seems rather problematic to me. But we'll see. But then, of course, you can't really find Dick most days either, can you? Anyone notice that? I have not seen that guy. I saw him here a couple of weeks ago, but he's pretty secretive. It's pretty. I don't know where Dick is, but anyway. So, we have an energy policy pretty much based in hell. Combusting into oblivion. That is what the energy policy is based on. This is the largest energy market in the world. Consume a third of the world's resources at just pretty much totally obscene levels of inefficient consumption in this society. Totally inefficient production systems. Linear production systems that take natural resources and labor and capital and end up with products and waste. Mostly a lot of waste. Because most of the products end up as waste too a few years later. We have a multitude of options. We have a way to fix ourselves out of the mess we got ourselves into. What it requires is action to make change. I think, obviously I'm someone that believes that you work on change on a number of levels. I believe in working in the electoral process. I know it's tough here in New Mexico as it is everywhere else. For progressive people to move a political agenda. I was a member of the largest party in America for many years, the non-voters. That would be me. 50% of the American electorate is non-voters. And I was a member of that party for many years, but then I realized that I had gone to court and litigated and gone to Congress and gone to the UN and testified at endless hearings and written letters and chained myself to the front of phone book factories and been arrested. And I said, I'll try that electoral process too. That's how I came to it, to be honest. It's that change requires a lot of different arenas. But I believe that those of us with these thoughts and these hearts, we should have some way to get our voices out there besides getting tear gassed. Or always demonstrating. And so I believe in making some change in that arena. I saw that the Navajos are looking at redistricting here, in New Mexico. I think that'd be a good thing, I'd like to see that in our area. Last year, or in 2000, I worked on the election in Montana in terms of getting out the Indian vote. Not for Greens, just for Indians. And we organized it there. We had a bunch of concerts. We had some down here too with Honor the Earth. We had those concerts up in Montana to get people registered to vote because they had prohibitive voter registration laws up there. And so we organized to get Indians to register, took them to register them, and then we actually helped finance getting Indians to the polls because one of the problems we had is that the polling places were not located in convenient locations for Indian people. Right. And so we had to drive folks to the polls, And you know what happened? 6 Indians elected to the Montana legislature. Wow. See? I see that. And then I went back to Minnesota and I said, we got 7 big reservations in northern Minnesota. Let's go. And so we're looking at those kinds of things. And geez, you got a lot of people down here. I look around and I think about, organizing the Indian vote around some of these issues. And I think it's a strategy. It is not the only thing, but I encourage people to think about that. My friend Ralph says you need 1 million people, or his thing is 1 million people to give $100 or 100 hours for social change to invest. I kind of come from the neck of the woods that says 4 million people, $25 or 25 hours. 4 million, $25 or 25 hours. You could go between the whole thing, but depending on where you're at in terms of your income, but engaging people civically. League of Women Voters, Take Back the Debates. I'm a big proponent of that. Nationally, but at a local level, I even joined the League of Women Voters. I'm like, come on, ladies. That is the rightful arena for discussions of candidates, not ads. It's debates. And so we got to figure out those processes of whether it's labor unions sponsoring debates or the League of Women Voters or whoever, engaging those more meaningful discussions as a part of a process in the electoral arena. Last pitch on the electoral stuff, 2 million elected positions in this country. 2 million. We just got 2 Greens elected to the Minneapolis City Council. I look out there and I think, You got like drain commissioners. Got all kinds of things. People should be running for these offices, and because one of the things we do need in terms of the electoral process is we need good people to run for office. Those good people are the yous that are right out there. Should not have to be a millionaire to run for office. Those are the things that. In terms of other things, obviously, I'm a proponent of grassroots organizing. That's where I spend a good portion of my work. Do the best we can. What we always say in our community are little mantras. I know it sounds absurd, but we aren't the smartest, we aren't the richest, but we're the ones who live here. It's true. You know what I mean? We waited for other people to fix it, and nobody came and fixed it. Federal government, every time they came out to our reservation, they go like this. 12 federal investigations on our land situation. Come out, go like this, and they go back to Washington. Didn't change our situation, did it? Same thing, other people, waited for people to fix it, then we decide, well, we'll try to fix it ourselves. We'll work on those issues ourselves. So that's how we form our organization. And out there across this country, a lot of you are in these organizations. That is how change is made. Working on environmental issues, on issues like, economic justice, around trade issues like living wage, campaigns, in our schools. There's so much work to do, but that is how democracy is made healthy. And that is also how we are made healthy. How our communities are made healthy is that we live in a healthy place that is that which we make ourselves. The bad news is there is no social change fairy. I was thinking for a while there was, like the cousin of the tooth fairy, the social change fairy. Had this little card I put under my pillow early after 2001 rolled around and George W. was enthroned. And that card said, I hope, dear social change fairy, I hope that George W. will find something really small to focus on. That's my prayer. It didn't really work out. Especially if you're from Afghanistan, it didn't work out. My thinking was, I was kind of praying for like trade relations with Liechtenstein or something. Wouldn't that be good if we got totally obsessed with something really like that? Or what Tony Blair wore last week or something. So then I realized there was no social change fairy, and that change is made by the hands of individuals. I come from a good family. My family always was engaged politically. My grandma made pocketbooks, actually, her whole life. Was in the union. Only reason we had a 40-hour work week and you could go to the bathroom and have a health care program was because people like my grandma, who organized. And I remember that, right to vote in this country. People died for the right to vote in this country. Civil rights. All of our Indian communities struggled and fought for any little thing we got. Recovery of land, any kind of justice. I think that change is coming. Some people ask me when I think change will be here. I like to refer to my friend Tom Goldtooth. This is really funny, watch this. Who says that that when white men in this society realize that the chemicals in the environment are causing their testicles to shrink. Then money will flow like water to the environmental movement. The bad news is, guys, the chemicals in the environment are causing the testicles to shrink. That only happens through the work of individuals. Like I said, there's no social change fairy, and that means kind of just you and me. That means us. Making those changes in our communities in whatever way it is that we can. To look at that future that we want, and make that future, make those prayers for that future, and go about the process of making that. Thank you.
That was Winona LaDuke on Native America, All Our Relations. She spoke at the University of New Mexico at Albuquerque. LaDuke is a mother, Native rights and environmental activist, and Green Party vice presidential candidate. Her latest book is All Our Relations, Native Struggles for Land and Life. This program was produced by Alternative Radio, an independent, award-winning weekly series. AR features diverse voices such as Hanana Shrawi, Noam Chomsky, Rahul Mahajan, Scott Ritter, and Greg Palast. To access our catalog, visit our website at alternativeradio.org. Again, that website address is alternativeradio.org. Or you can call our toll-free number, which I'll give you in just a moment. For credit card orders for the complete one-hour program you just heard, Winona LaDuke on Native America, All Our Relations, call us toll-free at 1-800-444-1977. Again, that toll-free number is 1-800-444-1977. You can send us a check. Tapes and CDs are $15. Transcripts are $9. Our address is AR, P.O. Box 551, Boulder, Colorado 80306. This program was recorded by Joe Gardner Wesley. David Barsamian is Alternative Radio's director. I'm Tanya Lohendorf. Thank you for listening.